Well, we are in 1 Corinthians 9 tonight. Made our way through 8. I always have those thoughts of like, oh, it's a short chapter. Maybe we will be able to scoot through it. And at this point, I've learned better than that. It's like, well, I know that's not the case.
Right.
It's going to rather just be, especially, I feel like any moment in 1 Corinthians is always a deep and difficult discussion, I think, in general.
Yeah.
But we are picking up where we left off, essentially, because, again, you have, I forget, 5, whatever it is, now concernings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I did read this book. 6, okay. So there's 6 times that he says now concerning. And so chapter 7 really shifts the focus of the book. He's kind of introduced it in the first 6 chapters, and now concerning matters that you have wrote, right? About sexual questions, marriage questions, and then food sacrificed to idols. And we're still in the food sacrificed to idols. It's one of those things where we may actually do better for 8, 9, really 10 and 11 all to be one chapter. Like we haven't left the flow for those entire chapters because we're all coming back to that kind of same focus. And so last week we talked about bending to the weaker, right? Serving the weaker. And that verse 12 is that highlight, right? Sinning against your brother and wounding their conscience when it's weak. You sin against Christ. So if food's a problem, I'll just never eat again in order to make them not stumble. And again, he's applying his own personal example in chapter 9. Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen our Lord Jesus? Are not you my workmanship in the Lord? If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. This is my defense to those who would examine me. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working for a living? Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk? The phrase working for a living is literally working with our own hands. He's referring, again, him and Barnabas have been traveling together. And these rights questions are interesting because we have the right to them, but we're choosing to lay them down, which is kind of not a hang up, I suppose, but one of the challenges to the discussion last week, which was, but I should be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Yes, but your rights don't supersede how you love other people. Nor do other people get to use that against you, which is essentially where we go into chapter 9. Mm-hmm. Because they have the right to be married and to have a wife and to have that wife travel with them, but they simply choose not to. Whereas Peter and others have married and are traveling with their spouse, and they have the right to do so. Mm-hmm. It becomes a point of discernment for us to decide what it is that we ought to be doing. It's the difficulty of Christian freedom in some ways. And he's making the point, right? What soldier goes into battle with, at his own expense and no hope of pay? Who works a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Mm-hmm. Verse 8, do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? So he's already talked at the beginning of his apostolic authority, and then the fact that this is him. But even then, I'm not even saying it from my own authority alone, because the Torah says the exact same thing. Verse 9, for it is written in the Torah, in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not certainly speak for our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher thresh in hope of sharing in the crop. If we have sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? So again, quoting from the Torah there in Deuteronomy 25, of not muzzling the ox. And I think it's interesting because he offers something similar to Jesus saying, look at the flowers and look at the sparrow, right? Does God not love you more than that? Right. So if he's making a rule for how you are to treat an ox, surely you should treat people at least that well. At least, yeah. Absolutely. Right? Surely, if we're not supposed to muzzle the ox, then you should pay your workers. And those that are sowing in spiritual things among you, is it too much that they reap material things from you? And so again, he's making the point that he's already been making, that there's a right for the workers of the field, for the evangelists and the pastors of the church, to be able to depend on the church for what they need. Now, whether or not that means that they should have their own private jets and book deals. Yeah. Well, so it's one of those. Yeah, I think because we'll get into spiritual gifts later on too, and talk and tongues and everything else. And Paul isn't dealing with people that are coming from the opposite side of the spectrum, because there are pastors who are in the day, teachers who are absolutely just give me more and more money. Mm-hmm. They are getting rich off of taking advantage of people spiritually. But the super apostles are addressed in 2 Corinthians, not 1 Corinthians. Here it's rather, you're not even caring for them in the first place. So all of these things are there. And again, I don't know that he's really making an argument in 1 Corinthians at all to say that you should pay your pastors. I think he's using it as an example to prove a point that he's talking about how you are to make your decisions and how you are to love others. Right? Should you not... if others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? If you're going to give any of the pastors and spiritual leaders in the church money, it should be Paul. If you're going to support anybody financially, it should be Barnabas, right? Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in the sacrificial offerings? In the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. This is the...
So when they say they get their living from the gospel, are they speaking monetarily?
Monetarily, yes. Yes. Yeah, he's speaking practically, right, in the same way that those in service of the temple got their food from the temple. Mm-hmm. The sacrifices that were brought in, there's certain parts of the meat or the bread that were set aside for them to eat. Mm-hmm. And of course, on top of that, I'm deciding if it's in the Torah or if it's just in Joshua. It's definitely in Joshua. But the Levites are given land for the purpose of farming, mm-hmm. right? Because they don't have a land of their own. They have farms in order to be able to tend for themselves in some way.
Right, but they don't actually have a land ownership.
Exactly right. And so it's
inheritance.
Exactly. And so the temple is their inheritance in that way. And so he's pushing even further, right? We don't make use of this right, but we would rather endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. One of the notes here in 14, he says that the Lord has commanded. I wasn't here for 7, but it's one of those points that I think is kind of a recurring theme, I guess, in the language of Paul. If you back up to chapter 7 in verse 6, he says, now as a concession and not a command, I say this, right? I'm simply trying to speak in wisdom to be able to allow for something, because I'd rather everyone be single like me. But that's if you cannot exercise self-control, then you should marry, for it's better to marry than to burn. And then he says, to be married, to the married, I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband. Right? If she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband should not divorce his wife. Again, he says, I'm telling you this reality, and it's not from me, it's from Jesus himself. But then in verse 12, he says, to the rest of you I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. So verse 12 is not saying, now this isn't Jesus' words, so it doesn't carry the same authority. He's an apostle. It is Jesus' words, but it's coming from Paul.
Right.
And of course, what's interesting is when he says that this command is not mine, but Jesus's, it's from Matthew 19. Whether or not Matthew already exists fully in the time of 1 Corinthians, we have no evidence of. Generally speaking, Matthew's thought to be written later. And that may be true. It also might be that parts of Matthew already existed and it wasn't brought together as a cohesive book until later. That could be a reality. It could be an oral tradition, something else. But what he knows is Jesus taught this. These are Jesus' words. And those words that he claims are Jesus's show up in Matthew 19. And so the same language is used in verse 14 of chapter 9. He says, in the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. And this is in Luke 10. Right? So he's, again, referring back to what Jesus has said. And in Luke 10, it's the disciples being sent out 2 by 2 to go proclaim the gospel and heal and exorcise demons. And he tells them, don't take a purse, don't take an extra cloak, don't take extra shoes. You're going to entirely live off of how people receive you. So again, monetarily, but I just think it's an interesting note of how he references these things. Because other places, where are you? It's in Timothy that he quotes what Jesus says, and he's quoting directly a line from Luke, and he refers to it as scripture. Like in the same breath, he refers to Luke and I think Deuteronomy as scripture. And so it's just fascinating to me, right, that you have this kind of internal evidence almost of the authors of the New Testament referring to each other as inspired text. That's kind of an aside, sorry. Verse 15, but I have made no use of any of these rights, nor am I writing these things to secure any such provision, for I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. For if I preach the gospel, that gives me no ground for boasting, for necessity is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel, for if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I am still entrusted with a stewardship. I've mentioned this in sermons and classes and whatever else of kind of the first sermons I ever preached at Life Springs. I had name tags for everybody to fill out, and very generously everybody wrote their name on it, thinking, oh, the pastor needs to know my name, which was great because I didn't know anybody's name. But that wasn't my intention. And so the series, the first one I came out of Colossians, right? We are now hidden with Christ in God. And so I wrote hidden on my name tag, and hello, my name is hidden. I think the second or third one was this text. And I said, hello, my name is Steward. And again, my intention was to introduce myself as you don't need to know anything about me because I'm hidden in Christ. Right? You'll learn that I love coffee. You'll learn some things about me. You'll learn parts of my personality that maybe you like or maybe you don't like. But what you should come to recognize by the grace of God is my being a Christian. And so not only is it true that I'm hidden in Christ, and I went to 2 Timothy 1, right, that we aren't given a spirit of fear and timidity, but of the word just escaped my brain of, it's not boldness, confidence. And so I said, hello, my name is Confident, and I preached that text, and preached this text, and hello, my name is Steward, and I talked about the fact that we're each given something to steward specifically, and for better or worse, or out of whatever kind of sense of humor God has, my stewardship is in pastoral care. And so, like, if you ask me why I do this, it's not because it's just sounded like a good time to me, right? It was something that was put on me that I have no choice in some sense. That's what he says. I don't have any ground of boasting in preaching the gospel because it's been laid upon me for necessity. I have to do it. Woe to me, in fact, if I don't do it, because this is what faithfulness looks like in my life. For if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I am entrusted with a stewardship. Right? Oh, I did this because I love Jesus. Great, there's a reward in that. But he didn't give me an option. This is what life is supposed to look like for me. And so I have a stewardship. I have a burden to bear. Right. It's something that personally I relate to in Paul's language. And I have a note there. I don't remember why I wrote it, so I'm just going to look at it real quick, which is in Jeremiah. Thus says the Lord, let not the wise man boast in his wisdom, let not the mighty man boast in his might, let not the rich man boast in his riches, but let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth, for in these things I delight, declares the Lord. It's Jeremiah 9, 23 and 24. Right? If I'm going to boast in anything, it's only going to be in knowing the Lord. Okay. And in knowing the Lord, we find ourselves with a calling, with a stewardship, with something that he's called us to do or to be. So then what, he says in 18, what is my reward? That in my preaching I may present the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my right in the gospel. His reward is to give it away freely. His reward is to not be a burden on anyone. And no, that clock does not work. Don't trust it.
I looked up and I was like, wait, what time is it?
No, it is very broken.
It's pretty close. No, actually, no, it's not.
Yeah,
Never mind.
it was good there for a second. Yeah. Right.
1 minute the other night, right?
Yes, exactly right. Right, his reward is to not make full use of his right in the gospel. 19, for I am free from all. I don't know what translation are you carrying with you?
The NASB.
NASB? Okay. Do you have the word though there at the beginning of 19? For though I am free from all? Mm-hmm. I don't know why that's there. I haven't, admittedly, I need to go probably nerd out on the Greek further. Yeah. But he just simply says, because I'm free from all. Mm-hmm. I've made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, as a Jew, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside of the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. Mm-hmm. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I might share with them in it. That's another thing is, do you have the word blessings added at the end of verse 23?
Things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it.
Yeah, that's better. The NASB has done a better job. I think the ESV is saying, like, to benefit from the blessing of the gospel. But he doesn't say, right, that I may share with them in its blessings. He says that I may share in the gospel with them. Okay. Which, again, the blessings helps interpret what he means by that, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But I think it sometimes becomes it gets in our way when we
Yeah.
talk about blessings.
Yeah, I could see that. I could
Right.
see that definitely.
So I will become to anyone what I must become, that I may invite them entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so again, don't lose sight of what we're looking at in chapter 8. He is calling us into a deeper understanding of what it means to be weak with the weak, be strong with the strong, be Jewish with the Jews, be Gentile with the Gentiles, right? Which is crazy, because I think very often we actually approach those relationships as you're wrong, fix it. Paul doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's exactly how I think most of the time we imagine Paul,
Mm-hmm.
is like, you're wrong, fix it. But rather he comes alongside so that, okay, you're not seeing this, so let me be as you are,
Mm-hmm.
that I may encourage you to,
Somebody said, I think it was just this Sunday, somebody said it about not, Phil said it, I'm pretty sure, about not caring what you know until you know that you care.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
That's what it was. That's exactly right. I think that's like an entry point to what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is one kind of piece of it, definitely.
Now, so, and in saying this, I guess I've seen this before, and I just kind of I don't want to say I get confused, but becoming all things to all men. To
Mhm.
what extent
Yeah.
does he? I mean, it's not like saying, well, I'm gonna go hang out at the bar with the drunks and be a drunk. I'm
Right.
not gonna go down the street with the crackhead and be a crackhead.
No.
So, like, I'm not trying to be rude, but so how does he become all things to all men? To what extent?
Right. He doesn't answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
But he isn't none of what he speaks about are issues of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think that's where you have to draw the line.
Right.
I think that's where he would draw the line,
Mm-hmm.
is to say what I'm speaking to are cultural kind of religious assumptions that exist within us, and that I'm not going to allow that to become a division
Mm-hmm.
that gets in the way of the gospel between us.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not gonna split hairs over doctrine, kind of thing that some people say.
To a degree, yeah. I think it depends on what we mean by doctrine.
Not necessarily, but
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Again, because like we can't necessarily soften the reality of the Trinity or of Christ crucified in those things, right? We can't give ourselves to another gospel as if there was one, like he says in
Right.
Galatians. In the same way that he's willing to stand up publicly and call out Peter for not eating, like there are things that need to be challenged in that way. But in terms of like secondary, if not like tertiary arguments, like for instance, eating food sacrificed to idols, it's just like, well, don't eat the meat.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, what he's talking about are points of convenience.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, we put stumbling blocks before other people in the name of our convenience. I think that's really what he's getting after.
Understandable, yeah.
Right? This is the easy way to do things, or this is something that I'm comfortable with, and I don't know why you struggle with that. Suck less. And Paul's saying you just don't love people. I suppose you really have to kind of take it case by case kind of thing.
You're not taking this in a literal sense necessarily, because there's some people that take that and they run with it. I've seen it, I've heard about it. People, I don't know, all things to all people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go be gay. I'm going to go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right.
It's not.
That's right.
Not what it meant.
Yeah, I think it's rather kind of thinking about what's getting in the way of them knowing Christ. And me getting drunk with them isn't going to remove a stumbling block. Right? If anything, it's going to add one.
But being all things to all people, in the sense of, like, for example, you're the pastor of this church, and yet you're humble enough to admit that you struggle with things, and you not only lead CR but attend CR and
Mhm.
participate in it. Like for example, a lot of pastors would not do that.
Mm.
So you're portraying yourself as a humble, broken human being rather than, well, I'm a pastor and I'm better than you all. So
Sure.
there's that.
I think that would be a way to talk about being all things is to be as others are. Is certainly a practical way to think about it. We could also just think about it in terms of the examples that he gives, right? To the Jews, I became as a Jew. So there are things that Jewish people just won't do. And they don't need to be smacked on the hand to be like, you don't have to do those things. You know what I mean?
Instead, so for example, if he was with Jews, he would say, I don't know, not eat pork or whatever.
Definitely, yeah.
Whatever Jews don't do,
Yeah, exactly. That would be, I think, an obvious example, right? Sabbath and whatever else. Of course, what's interesting too is he makes the example of Jew. He also makes the example of those under the law. And so that seems to be two different things, at least in the categories of what he's presenting. Again, something that is cultural versus something that is something that is still bound by the Torah. Seems to be, I think, the distinction that he's making. Whereas he doesn't make the cultural distinction of those outside the law. He rather just clumps them all together. Because I suppose their culture could be understood as being a part of that conversation of being outside the law. Again, it's not, he's written it in really vague terms.
He says, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ. So
right. Again, which means I'm not going to go to a brothel and jump in, the orgy with all the other pagans in order to reach them for Christ.
Right.
That no. I'm still under the law of Christ. He's just talked about in chapter 6 the fact that if I give my body to sin, then I'm bringing Christ's body into sin.
Right.
So what I'm not going to do is that. But I'm also not going to just start judging everybody for their sinful, broken lifestyle, because I'm going to rather invite them into wholeness and freedom from where they are in the first place. So I do think there's a point of, we oftentimes judge people in our actions more than we judge them with our words or the faces that we make or whatever else. It's just like, no, I'm not going to eat that. No, I don't do that. No, I'm not. I won't go there. I won't be there. And all of those are essentially stumbling blocks that we put up in order to say, no, I won't reach you. And I think that's the way that you're on it in terms of, what is it? People don't care what you know until they know you care. Right. And so I'm not going to do anything that prevents any of that, that gets in the way of that, that judges them or belittles them as if I don't care about them or they're too lost for me to reach or whatever else it is. But I do think there's a lens that we look at this through sometimes that breaks it. And we do it on both sides. Obviously, the easy one is all things to all people, and so we'll just have church in the bar. And everything will be fine. Well, I don't know that that's the wisest decision.
No, right.
Right, and at the same time, there's nothing wrong with having alcohol.
Right.
Like it's not wrong to have a glass of wine and discuss the things of God. That can be beautiful worship. That's
Sure,
okay.
absolutely. I mean, that's like we have wine at our house and other alcoholic beverages, but we also have people in our home that don't drink, and so when they're around, we don't drink it.
Right.
It's put away. It's under lock and key, and it's and it stays there. And we'll only do that either in privacy or when they're not around. And that's just a way of being respectful to them and their weakness.
That's exactly right. And so to think about cultural differences, kind of religious differences, doctrinal differences to a degree, I suppose. Like for maybe. Like I take issue, and we'll get to the tongues issue later in Corinthians, but I take issue with certain acts of worship that are included in certain in the body. And if I want to reach and love these people, then what I'm not going to necessarily do is stand up in the middle of worship and be like, you fools, and condemn them or whatever else, but rather to say, what do you think is happening there?
Right.
Why is that? Why is that the right way to worship? Where have you learned that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's going on here, and that he does it all again because the focus is love. The focus is um, not wanting to wound the conscience of the weak.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is weak, they're and bound to the idea that they have to keep Sabbath every week,
Right.
then okay, can I join you for Sabbath dinner?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't have to go. Like we don't have to follow Sabbath. Then that's not a thing. That's not how this works.
Right.
So anyway, but that's kind of I think more so what he's talking about. And the things that are sinful and broken, that's not at all what he's talking about because he's already dealt pretty squarely in the face of sin
Right.
before that. And then he ends this idea with a rhetorical question in verse 24. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. And this is just building off of verse 23, that I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in it. I participate. I make myself weak to be with weak, and all things to all people, that I may save some, that I may participate in the gospel. This reality of humble love, and the challenge then becomes because this isn't just a guaranteed ticket out of hell that we've been given.
Yeah.
Right? He leaves room for the possibility that even after I come to believe and live into what Christ has given me, if I do not give myself to it and discipline myself in it and restrict myself for the sake of love, I myself could be disqualified even after preaching it, which is crazy, right? It's one of those verses that I don't like gotcha verses. I don't think that's helpful in any conversation.
Right.
But when we talk about the once saved, always saved ideas, this is one of those places that says, if that's true, explain to me what Paul is talking about. Because he goes on to expound on this. Again, this is all one idea, going back to the idea of food for idols, food dedicated to idols, through this place of his disqualification, which is not a motivation, right? He's not trying to avoid disqualification by being faithful. Mm-hmm. It's rather this is what faithfulness looks like. And then because of chapter 10, I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Right? He makes the point to say that, I discipline my body, keep it under control, that I myself may not be disqualified, because I don't forget God's people have already been disqualified before. Mm-hmm. That didn't change. God's judgment has always been reserved for God's people, because they've been called to the purpose of calling the rest of the world into the life that he's called them to. And so these covenant people are held to a covenant standard. Right? He was not pleased with them, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. And now these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. That's the moment in the Exodus when calf gate happens. Right? They've made this golden calf, and that's the quote there in Exodus 32, that they rose up to play, which, from my best reading, it's a euphemism to having an orgy for the sake of worshiping this God that they've created for themselves. Right? So he says, we must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroyer. So he's referring to these stories in Numbers. First is in the Valley of Peor, when right after what's his name? Balaam tries to go up and curse the people, but he can only say blessing. And so then he goes goes down with the king and says, "Well, look, we can't curse them, but what you can do is you can send your women in there, and they'll corrupt them from the inside out." Mm-hmm. And so Moses comes to find all these people, again having sex with all these Moabite women, and this is where the zeal of Phineas comes from. I don't know if you know that story. One of the Levitical priests runs a couple through with a spear in the middle of the act. Mm-hmm. And he's praised by God for his zeal for God. It's a pretty great story. One of the issues here is there's a little textual, just funky thing. I don't remember the number in Numbers 25. It's not 23,000. Mm-hmm. It's one of those little moments in Scripture where if you're meeting a really annoying atheist that wants everything to be perfectly symmetrical and all the right things, and it's just like, well, it can't be because Paul got the number wrong or whatever else it was.
Yeah, it says 20,000 died in the plague, and 3,000 were killed by the Levites. Which, remember, that was two separate things.
Okay.
So maybe they
absolutely
threw it all in there together.
Are those are in your notes there?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Levites in Exodus 32:28, and then 20,000 people died in the plague in Exodus 32:35.
Oh, so it's not Peor. Well, that would make more sense because he referred to Exodus, so I have that wrong, don't I? Mm-hmm. I don't know where I got that note from. Yeah, I guess I was just jumping into Numbers for the next one. Okay, that's good. That's helpful. And then verse 9, we must not put Christ to the test as they did and were destroyed by serpents. Mm-hmm. Right, this is the bronze serpent in Numbers 21 when he lifts that up that they may be healed. Right. And then verse 11 is a really important verse for me, just thinking about what the Bible is. Now, these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Mm-hmm. Right? That all of the Old Testament was actually, that God participated in orchestrated historical events that they may be recorded in such a way for us who are in Christ to learn from.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I think Josh has said that, but I think you've said it too. Mm-hmm. Some examples of don't do that.
Well, and it also sets the stage for a better understanding of who God is, which is ultimately and finally proved in the cross. Mm-hmm. Verse 12, therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. So therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. That's an important little moment in verse 15 where he says, test my words. Mm-hmm. The preacher is never greater than the message. Right. And so, again, we still haven't left the argument or the theme, the idea that he's been addressing since chapter 8, right? Mm-hmm. Concerning food offered to idols. Mm-hmm. That knowledge, you just knowing what's better and what's good and what's fair and what's free, just puffs you up in pride. Mm-hmm. But love builds up. And that looks like you lowering yourself, even giving up what rights you very well may have, as I very well have rights, but I'd refuse to participate in them, because not only are they going to save as many people as possible, but it's also going to protect me. Right? It's going to find myself in a place where I am not disqualified, where God is pleased, where I'm not indulging in immorality and things that will bring about my own destruction. And we have every reason to think that we can live this way. This is the verse we have in CR, right? That anyone who thinks he stands firm, be careful lest he fall.
Yep. Very much so.
But you can actually take heed about this, because no temptation has ever overtaken you that everybody else hasn't already gone through. Right? And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. And this is the verse that people twist to say that God won't give you more than you can handle. Wrong. God will always give you more than you can handle. He will never let you be tempted by something you cannot resist.
Right.
Those are two very different things. Two very different things.
Right.
So test what I say. The cup of blessing that we bless is not is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Consider the people of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices participants in the altar? What do I imply then? The food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No. I imply that what pagan sacrifice they offered to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? So remember, he's going to come back to where he started. All things are lawful. But he's dealt with the issue of whether or not we should be eating food sacrificed to idols. He says, no, it's fine. It's just meat. Don't have to worry about that. But he's then built the case saying, but because of love, don't mess other people up who take that thing as heavy and true and real. Right? You may even think about it in terms of, like, if people come from the place of this, broken, weak assumption that Halloween is evil, maybe just don't go trick-or-treating. It'll be fine. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But then he pushes it even further here in chapter 10, which is the place that we have to consider, which goes back to what James writes all the churches in Acts 15, which is to say that, no, you don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to become Jewish. You don't have to be under the law or any of those things. But we do want to warn you to not participate in sexual immorality, to not eat food sacrificed to idols, or to drink blood or eat strangled animals. And so the rule of thumb, so to speak, right, the expectation from the apostles to the Gentile world in particular is to just not eat food sacrificed to idols. And Paul kind of gives permission to do so, but in the same breath also says, but why would you? Like, you...
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
There you go. Which is where he started at in the first place, right? That, Lord help me. My goodness, was that all the way back? That was in chapter 6, right? Chapter 6, 12. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I'm not going to be dominated by anything, right? He comes back to this idea there in chapter 10. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Eat what is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. He actually gives some really practical advice here, right? For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That's Psalm 24. If one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. Right? Don't say, hold on, where did this meat come from? But if they say, oh, I got this great meat from the altar of Apollos, don't eat it. Right? If someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it for the sake of the one who informed you and for the sake of conscience. I do not meet your conscience, but his.
Yeah.
Right? Why should my liberty be determined by someone else's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I denounced? Because of that for which I give thanks. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. Give no offense to Jews or Greeks or to the church of God. Just as I try to please everyone in everything I do not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me, as I am of Christ. Verse 1 of chapter 11 is absolutely supposed to be verse 34 of chapter 10.
Yeah.
completely botched that. It makes
Right.
no sense.
Yeah, so it's not the first time I've seen that.
Yeah, that is couldn't be more certain of that wrong division than anything.
When I say the Bible is inspired, however, the chapters and verses
That
weren't.
they most certainly are not. Yeah. Yeah, and so you go into a dinner party and somebody just makes you a plate. You say thank you, praise God for it, eat your meal, enjoy it, and move on. But if they rather say like, oh man, I got this great deal on this sacrifice from this altar, then you say, no, I think I'm good. That doesn't mean rush out the house. That doesn't mean berate them and correct them, right? You're still there. I'll take the veggies, and the wine, but I'm not going to eat the meat because the meat is attached to something that I don't want to encourage. Again, it's hard to apply this in one way or the other because alcohol may not actually be the most direct influence that we need to think about. It may rather be, are we free to watch whatever movie we want to? Sure, but is that thing complete filth and dripping from all of this influence that's everywhere else? No, I think I'll keep from that movie, and just if nothing else to encourage the conscience of the person that I'm with, to go, why are you okay with watching that hate-filled, gory, sexual movie? Which is somewhat of the difficulty because there's not a direct one-to-one relationship in the reality of food sacrificed to idols. We kind of have to think about, we have to challenge ourselves constantly to be like, well, all things to all people, what does that mean? And it may more so have to do with our language and our entertainment than it does with anything. We don't have food sacrificed to gods. That's not a thing.
Right.
We don't, but we do have things that I guess are, I don't know, like the new season of Stranger Things is about to come out.
Oh goodness. How
Right.
many years has it been?
I know, right?
A long time.
Yeah, and
Josh watched it. It was weird to me.
yes, it is weird, and it's one of those things of like, well, maybe I should say no to it just for the sake of conscience.
Maybe.
And that's, I don't know. There's a line there. There's a wisdom there that we're not paying enough attention to, I think. I mean, maybe even the point of saying like, well, I deleted social media. Why? Because it has no benefit to me whatsoever.
I mean, yeah.
And so is it lawful for me? Yeah, but does it actually build any of us up? Like I find some good sermon clips on it every once in a while, but surely I could just read a book, that wouldn't be filled with all the other things that are in there.
Exactly, because for every nugget of truth out there, you got to sift through all the rest of the garbage.
Yeah, well, and I struggle with that too because I'll talk to people about potentially starting a podcast or doing other things like that online, and some people are just like, yeah, I mean, do it. We need more stuff like that out there. It's
Sure,
like,
absolutely.
I hear what you're saying. And
Others are like, oh, social media is of the devil.
Yeah,
Don't do it.
right. And so should we not then bend to the one who has that conscience seared in that way to say like, oh no, that's dangerous. We need to avoid that.
Well, it's like I was literally listening to a podcast last week, and the guy was talking about the ills of social media. Like the same discussion here, he was talking about how when the iPhone, this first smartphone, first came out, that at one point in time he was having, hanging out with his friends, and they were all hanging out together and having conversation and looking each other in the eyes, face to face, that kind of thing. He says, and then the very next week, like the new smartphone came out, the very first one, and they all had it, and they were all like this, and it was like faces in their phones. And he said, and even then I knew it wasn't a good thing. And yet he's doing a podcast on his smartphone to people in the middle of Finland, like in the middle of the woods in Finland, are just like, yes, and but, and I get it, I get that, just like with you with the podcast or whatever, it's like, there's that pull to reach people and be all things to all people in that aspect, and then
Sure.
it's like to what cost, and is it worth it in the long run? You know.
Yep.
And so I guess you have to ask yourself that when you're going about it ultimately. Um,
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile asking in that regard. Like, would Paul have started a podcast?
I think he would have. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Paul would have for sure.
You just don't have, you don't actually have connection with people as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if the letters that he wrote were satisfactory to his mission and his purpose, then they all wouldn't be dripping with his desire to be with them.
True.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which again, the podcast is the letter. You know what I mean?
Right.
If that's all I'm doing, we're probably in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where don't put all your eggs in one basket. I was again yesterday.
Mhm.
While I was rolling pecans, I was listening to a podcast with the same guy in Finland, and because I just like hearing about all the things that go on in other countries.
Definitely.
Cool. And he was talking he interviews other people, kind of like you did with the with the dude that was in the sanctuary earlier, the young man that was talking to Shane. Some business, had a podcast.
Oh, Levi, yeah.
Yeah, Levi. Thank you. Couldn't remember his name. I'm like drawing a blank. The Steel Kid. Yeah. Anyways, and so you went into the podcast with him.
Mhm.
This guy interviews people like that, and he was talking to this young man who, like, literally just did a podcast where he just gets online and he paints. It wasn't a podcast. I'm sorry. It was YouTube Live. Same difference. A YouTube Live, and he wasn't really like having conversation with these people. He was just painting, but he built this entire community of people who would just watch him paint, and then they would feel inspired to go get their brushes and their canvas, and they would start painting. And before he knew it, he had all these people that were just like sitting around painting on a video, like together, and so I don't know. I mean, there's community to be had, but
Right.
to what extent?
We're certainly hungry
And-
for it.
yeah.
I don't know.
I find I don't make it for like a lot of the dinners and stuff, but I find that this is a lot more conducive to my mental well-being, my spiritual well-being than say the podcasts and all of that.
Yeah.
That just fills an empty hole, to be honest.
I agree. There's something celebrity about it too, that like makes these people something extra special, right? Which is also problematic.
Yeah, like you get those ones that all of a sudden they're like viral, and everybody's following them. Just like, I don't know about all that. So
Yeah, and I mean, you can't have relationship with them, really.
not really, no.
You know,
in that aspect.
Because I mean, even if it's me interviewing and speaking people one-on-one in podcast form or whatever else, you're not going to get to know my wife. You're not going to know my kids. You're not really going to know. You can hear my story and stuff like that, and that's good. But I just it can be supplementary, I suppose. But it when it becomes the main thing or the only thing, I think we've messed that up.
Because then there's that fine line of, well, you may be the only Jesus that somebody sees. So
Sure.
Your podcast or your YouTube Live
Right.
or whatever might be that thing.
Right.
I mean, it sounds strange because, like, our friend Tammy, she's getting out and going to the senior center and stuff in the daytime, so she's finally getting out. She's being around people, but for some reason, our live stream in the morning is like a lifeline for her. And if she misses it, she's just like, I missed it. You gotta send me the link. I gotta watch. It's just like, so for some people, it is a connection, whether it's real or not. So
Right.
it's,
Right. And again, I think the point is not to necessarily judge these things, but it is important to think, okay, am I making choices off of what I believe is due to me, right? Am I making choices for my own convenience and things I like and say, well, I can do whatever I want to? Well, yeah, sure you can. But you can't do that and be loving. So which one are you being right now?
Right.
And I think that's where the challenge kind of lays. And I think it's almost maybe the reason, or the reason that it's good that it's as vague as it is.
Yeah.
to challenge us to always be in the place where we are making ourselves available to people,
Mhm.
um,
And is
to
it-
not be a stumbling block in any kind of way.
And is it too codependent? You were talking about the stumbling block. Is it too codependent to take others into consideration in your decision making?
Mhm.
Because that's where that goes too. But
Yeah.
I think that's more like being loving to your fellow brothers. And
I think it
sisters.
can be, and we probably we at some point are guilty of calling faithfulness codependency because it puts other people's needs ahead of our own.
Mhm.
Right? That's probably true.
Mhm.
I think you can be pretty certain where codependency lies if you will be honest about your own anxiety revolving around it. Right? If you feel like you have to
Mhm.
tend to these things for these people,
Mhm.
then that's probably codependency.
Mhm.
But if you are actively considering the needs of others and considering them more important than yourself, that's just holiness. That's not codependency.
Very well explained. Mhm.
But I will concede that I think from the outside looking in, they may look the exact same.
Mhm.
Especially if, and this isn't weakness, this is hard-heartedness. Especially if I am going to be a person who lives according to my own rights and say I'm free to do whatever I want to, then when I see Paul giving up things in his own life for these people, then I very well may use something like codependency to throw at Paul and be like, you're just trying to please everybody.
Mhm.
Right? To be fair, that's exactly the accusation that came to him in Galatia.
Mhm.
Right? Because he says, like, I'm sorry, I'm not here to please people, I'm here to please God.
Right.
Because the accusation was he's telling you you don't have to be circumcised just to lower the bar and make it easier for you to be a Christian.
Mhm.
No, sir.
That's not the point.
No. Right? You're actually the one wanting to do something for your own good to try and not muddy the water or shake make waves
Mhm.
in your security as a Jewish person who's an approved religion in the Roman Empire.
Mhm.
No, I'm not the one trying to please people. You're the one trying to please people. But it's not the people in the church, it's the people in authority outside the church that you're trying to please.
Mhm.
I'm just simply trying to please God.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think, well, and go back to Celebrate Recovery's language for this, right?
Mhm.
I'm not here to fix anybody. I'm not here to diagnose anybody
Mhm.
of what it is that they're struggling with. And if, me as a pastor or anybody as, a sponsor in that setting or whatever else, if we're doing our job well, bye, good to see you. If we're doing our job well, then we will ask good questions. We won't simply say, this is what you're doing, and this is why you need to stop, and this is how you need to fix it.
Mhm.
Because then I'm being codependent,
Mhm.
right? Because I want to fix you. And at best, I'm being codependent. At worst, I'm just being puffed up and prideful, and I just, I'm better than you, and this is how I'm going to fix you.
Mhm.
Could be all sorts of reasoning or influence or motivation behind it, and it doesn't have to be codependency. But I think that's a fair question because I think it could border on that pretty easily.
Very.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Random change here, but
Sure.
back here in 9:15, but I have used none of these things.
Yeah.
So is he saying? What is he saying there? I'm thinking he's saying, well, but I didn't take a wage, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or what?
That's what he means is, well, he that's the context. He said, I haven't taken a wage. I have, and by none of these things, other things that he's listed,
Mhm.
is having a wife, right? If you back up to verse 4, do we not have right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife? Right? Do we not have the right to work with our own hands? Right? And
he's referring to his labor.
yeah, being a tent maker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And so, yeah, continue on is like, but I didn't make any use of these rights. Immediately after talking about the temple servants are given food from the temple. Right? I should have monetary means coming from those that in whom I have spiritually sown. But I have not made use of any of these rights, right? Nor am I writing this letter in order for you to give me anything,
Yeah, like I'm not saying that to guilt you.
right? Because
I am calling it to your attention,
that's
not
yeah.
specifically because I want anything done about it, but just so you know where I stand.
I think it's very similar to Second Corinthians. Where is that? Where are you? Second Corinthians. Second Corinthians. The 11, right? He talks about the fact of like, oh, why not? Let me just be an absolute idiot. Let me become more and more foolish, and so that I can make a point, right? Because I'll just go all out. Let me tell you all about all the ways that I've slept outside in the cold without any shelter, and how I've been beaten almost to death, and how I've been hung, and how I've been ridiculed and run out of town, and right, the beaten with rods, and been in shipwrecks, and I've been in all of these things, right? And then on top of all of this, there's the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches, right? He's just like, let me make myself an example to you, which is ridiculous. But apparently you don't seem to be grasping what this is supposed to look like. And so that's exactly what's happening in 9, because at the end of 10, he says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. He's giving himself as an example to say, in the same way that I didn't allow you to even pay me a dime, because it would have been something that violated your ability to be faithful, right? It would have gotten in the way. The way I talk about that in verse 12 is like, if you had paid your staff to be ministers, then you would have used it as an excuse to be like, well, they're the ones who do ministry, and I just pay the ministers. The heck you do. Please cut my salary off. Right? And sometimes Jess has to stop me from saying that sentence in a board meeting. But, right? So right. People will think you're crazy for this, all of these things. And he has this aside, right? Going from verse 24 of 9 through, Lord have mercy, verse 22 of 10, right? That's all an aside to talk about the fact that we are held to a standard, and that we can be disqualified from a life of faith when we completely leave it, and all of these things. And then he returns back to his original argument, but he starts comparing it to communion. Sorry, I'm mixing up my verses. It's a little bit before that. But, if the bread is not just bread, it's participation in the body. The wine is not just wine, it's participation in the blood. Since we believe that, right? Anybody who just says it's a symbol, read 1 Corinthians. I don't know to tell you that, right? Since we know that to be true, surely it must also be true that in participating in this meat sacrificed to idols, we are participating in demons. Right? And so why are you participating in it at all? Oh, because I can. It's not a big deal. Yeah, okay, fair. It's not a big deal. But are you loving anybody in the process of it? And I think about that a lot, because as I'm walking around Whitfield with my children and seeing all of these like murderers and demons and everything else walking up and down the street, it's like, hold on, why are we here and what are we doing? Right? Like, I don't.
Yeah, because it's actually gotten worse and worse over the years.
And it's going to continue to get worse and worse, and eventually we won't have any choice but to remove ourselves from it. You know what I mean? But am I going to be worried about people calling me a prude?
I mean, they're going to do it regardless.
That's exactly right. But when it's just like, hey, I got, I don't know, I don't watch horror movies, but like, hey, I got this movie, let's watch it tonight. Like, nah, man, no, I ain't watching that. Oh, you scared? No, I'm not scared. It's not beneficial to me, my soul, my body, my mind, or yours for that matter.
We don't watch Buddha,
But you see what I'm saying? Like right.
The world's evil enough. Why deliberately expose yourself to it?
Yeah. Facts. Yeah, it's exactly right. Right. And the same can be said in terms of pornography or any other sexual material or anything else.
Yeah.
So, we're in trouble when the young adults are leaving.
Right. And it's actually,
Oh,
It's 8:26.
yeah, yeah, we're past time for sure.
That's pretty good because I normally can't hang a conversation like that because I just like just sit there and listen. And
Right.
everybody else was just like,
Well, this one's a lot, anyways, because you see how like we're still in chapter 8, and for all intents and purposes,
yeah,
right? And he's going to go on another tangent on head coverings, and then he's going to come back to the Lord's Supper again because he hasn't left the whole idea yet. It's
Yeah.
all one idea.
yeah,
But in chapter 9 in particular, right? He's okay. Let's use me as an example. Yeah, I think it's gonna be a lot of wisdom and a lot of purpose
yeah.
for us to apply it to our own lives and to think about how best to do that faithfully.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's a matter of conscience, I guess. You know, when it comes down to all that, and respect for your brothers and sisters in Christ.
Right, and especially respect for their consciences.
Yeah,
Because sure, my conscience doesn't mess me up there. Great. Does other people's consciences get messed up because you're living so freely?
right.
Then why don't you love other people enough to do something about it?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And this is, again, I think of this in terms of drinking alcohol in public. I think of this in terms of mercy, the living together before you're married. Like we can go on and on and on of all the things that we are doing to other people to be like, just grow up.
Well, there's that thing, like I've been having a conversation with a friend of mine because her husband hangs out with other women that are friends in the daytime while she's at work, and well, I think there's a whole other story behind that. But still, it's look, even if the intents are innocent, even if you're just giving somebody a ride or doing whatever it is you're doing, there's that whole thing in the Bible about not causing another person to stumble. And what if, I don't know, not that they hang out with a bunch of believers, but what if another believer saw you out away from your wife with another woman? I mean, you're going to cause another person to stumble. I always, think about that, that aspect of, somebody's going to see that and go, oh, well, they can do it. I can do it.
Yep.
Or whatever, well, they're just a friend or anything like that.
Yep.
Let's just not.
That's right.
Avoid the appearance of evil.
Right, and that's fair. That's fair. That's a hard one for me because like somebody asks to counsel or speak or whatever else, it's like, okay, I will meet you up at the coffee shop with our Bibles open, right? And everybody in here knows I'm the pastor.
Right. And that's a very public thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give you a ride to the coffee shop.
Right.
We're not going to be alone together ever.
Ever.
Right.
Exactly.
Because that's going to be unacceptable. Hey, buddy.
Howdy.
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 How are you?
Doing great. I'm pooped.
Yeah.
But I'm doing great.
Long day.
Yeah. Story of my life.
Yeah, long week.
Yeah.
Very long week.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was hoping to encourage Scott tonight.
Yeah.
Sure.
They're already up
Yeah,
over at Highlands.
I figured that was true.
Yeah. That's where